third grade.
Oh, wow.
Third grade, because we have a day school here and they just need help, because they're teaching on Zoom. It's on Zoom. So
Right.
we're teaching Judaism to 8-year-olds.
Wow.
So
That's such a cute age, though. It really
is a cute age. It is a very cute age. They're sweet.
They're eager to learn.
They are. They still enjoy learning, so that's good.
Has school started there?
I think it starts next week.
Oh, okay.
Next week. So I invite people who have their cameras off to turn them on, their microphones, because we'd love to see you. Even if you're eating or your hair's a mess, we don't care. We'd love to see you. Hi, Miriam. You're muted, just so you know. And
Susan, I wanted to ask you, I haven't heard anything about it. Didn't you get a puppy several weeks ago?
oh, you didn't hear the second half. I became violently allergic to the puppy.
Oh, no.
Oh,
And I had to return him.
Oh,
And it was an expensive dog, but the breeder returned all my money. So that was
That's very nice.
very nice. I only had him for 3 days and I was wheezing. It was his saliva. I was allergic to his saliva.
Wow.
Fur.
what kind of dog was it?
It was a Maltese, beautiful little Maltese puppy.
Really? And
Beautiful.
They're the least allergic of the dogs.
Actually, no, poodles, I think.
poodles are.
Well, mine is a
Poodles and
Maltese.
schnauzers are very non-allergic.
Yeah,
Well, the hair wasn't the hair. It was the
the saliva.
all the
Yeah, I've
time.
never heard of that before.
I didn't either, but I was wheezing, I was scratching. I mean, it got worse, and it stopped. And I gave him back. So
oh, I'm so sorry.
I'm glad you got your money back.
so there's some noise somewhere in the background. I don't know.
Yeah, it's off now.
Okay, let's see. All right, well, let's start. And if you have the study sheet, it was correct yesterday and then wrong today, but it's about Rosh Hashanah. And then some people were able to get the correct one. But let's start with a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai
Eloheinu
melech
haolam
asher
kitanu
b'mitzvotav
v'tzivanu
v'asok
Divrei Torah.
Amen. So going through the, it's so weird. Going through the, different parts of the high holiday in depth, high holy days. And I wanted to talk about Rosh Hashanah today. But before I begin, I'd like you to share what you know about Rosh Hashanah. So tell me about Rosh Hashanah. What do you know? What is it, and what does it celebrate, and what's its significance, and what are our traditions? I'm curious how much you know. I mean, I think you know a lot, and there's some stuff I found out that I didn't even know, so that stuff we'll talk about. So tell me something about Rosh Hashanah.
The birth of the world.
It's the birth of the world. So this is in my sermon for second day Rosh Hashanah, but the expression is Hayom Harat Ha'olam, which they translate as today the world is born. But really the word Harat comes from the same root as herion, which means pregnancy. And so it really is saying today the world is pregnant. Who has a radio on or something? Thank you. Okay. Today the world is pregnant, or today's world is pregnant with possibilities. Today the world was conceived. We could go more than created, because it's, when you're conceived, you're still pregnant. So it's a very interesting word, and we can interpret it to mean that the world is pregnant with possibilities, and our year is pregnant with possibilities, and we are pregnant with possibilities, or what we are going to conceive or give birth to this year is up to us. And I always think how amazing it is that in our religion, in Judaism, there's this opportunity every single year to reconceive ourselves, reconceive our goals, and start over. So that's right. It's the birthday of the world, but it's really the conception of the world would be the more proper translation. What else do you know about Rosh Hashanah? That's it? I can do that. Come on. What do you know? Tell me.
Forward your analogy in the sense that you're reconceiving yourself. You're beginning a period in which you look at yourself and are recreating yourself in a better image. You're doing that period between the holidays for the degree of internal growth, conception of a better self.
Okay, that's absolutely right. So there are 4 names for Rosh Hashanah that sort of give us a hint to what it's about. And the one name that's mentioned in the Torah, there's no one saying it's a new year or the beginning of the year. Rosh HaShana means beginning of the year, Rosh, head. But it's called Yom Teruah, which is, if you recognize it, it's one of the 3 blasts of the shofar. Yom Teruah means the day of the shofar blast. That's what you're supposed to do on that day. And the rabbis say the big mitzvah is hearing the shofar on this day. If you look at my study guide, it turns out that, well, sort of calendar-wise, Tishrei is the 7th month. Originally, it was the 7th month. The first month was Nisan, which was the month that the Exodus happened in, Passover happened in. But the rabbis decided to make Rosh Hashanah and this other new year on the 7th month. And there's some people that say because in Babylonia, that was the time of their new year. But I like the idea that the 7th month is like Shabbat, the 7th, which is just a holy number. And they picked that for this special kind of new year, not a agricultural new year or a civil new year, but a spiritual new year. They picked it on the 7th month, you know, at the time, I don't know, I guess before the fall harvest, when there's this possibility of fertility and ripeness that we can direct in a certain direction. So what's the name? Okay, the first name is Yom Teruah. The second name is Yom HaZikaron, the Day of Remembrance. So why do you think it would be called that, Yom HaZikaron? And you know, we have Yizkaron, same root on Yom Kippur, but why would Rosh Hashanah be called the Day of Remembrance, do you think? Any idea? Yom HaZikaron.
Well, the purpose was stated. During that reflective, introspective period, remembering is the only way to achieve that.
So
we are people of memory.
So it's us remembering, but also the rabbis say it's God remembering. It's a solemn day. It's not just us remembering what we did wrong and trying to say, I'll be better. But traditionally, it's God remembering the kind of year we lived. God is aware. If you know, I'm just going to jump to the tradition of Tashlich, which we know about, where we go to the body of water and we throw in
the bread of affliction.
Yeah, bread and moving waters. But why? What does it really mean? Well, according to one interpretation, it's because the fish who live in the water, I love this, the fish who live in the water, fish have no eyelids. They're always looking at you, and it's to remind you that God is always looking at you, like with the eyes of a fish, you know, never blinks, always is watching you. This idea, again, that there's something bigger than us, that we're judged on a more global, universal, spiritual level, and that God is remembering how you've behaved, not just you reflecting. That's why Teshuva is so important. And then after God remembers, the next name is Yom Hadin, the day of judgment. And we know that the beautiful image or scary image of Rosh Hashanah is that God has this book, it's the book of life, and that the people or their souls or the Jewish people pass before God like sheep before the shepherd. and he's judging us, and they say, the Midrash says that the bad people are immediately put in the book of, death or suffering. The purest people are put in the book of life immediately. And then the rest of us, it's how we're going to behave. And they rabbi set these 10 days between Rosh HaShana and Yom Kippur, this 10 days of, for some reason, it's translated these days as the 10 days of awe, but that's not really the translation. The Hebrew is Aseret Yemei Teshuva, the 10 days of Teshuva. And this is the crunch time of between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur for really making amends, repenting. And we talked last week about, did we? Yeah. Did I talk about it here? Yeah. The 4 steps to Teshuva, recognizing that you did something wrong, stopping it, making amends, and then never doing it again. So those are the 4 steps to Teshuva. That's that time. In the more reform or liberal thing, we say it's not just those 10 days, it's all year. The Teshuva, and also the rabbis say Teshuva goes on continuously. But this metaphor and how Jews for thousands of years really viewed this high holidays as a time of awe and judgment, and a time to really take stock of your life at this time. Because now what I want to ask you your opinion. So what is weird to me is like they're saying, who will live and who will die? Well, everyone dies. So what do you think it really means to be written into this book? I mean, if you die that year, were you a bad person necessarily? I mean, how do we reconcile this idea? I'm curious if you have any opinions. And I've not read any answers, so there's no right answer. It's let's think about it. If we all die, what is the meaning of being written in the book of life, in your opinion? Or not? Let's have some theorizing.
That we stay alive to those people on earth.
I like that we stay alive to those people on earth. Good. Any other ideas about it? Ruth?
Yeah, I think being written into the book of life means that every single person on earth has the right to be, and therefore to be written in the book of life just means it's a recording of your own personal history. I think.
I like that. That. Maybe it's being written into the kind of life you're going to have that year. Maybe it's, if you're written into the book of life, or even if you end up dying that year, what kind of life did you have until the moment of your death? And we know in the Untitled Chapter that we're going to look at in a minute, it says, it's written who will live, who will die, who by stoning, who by hanging, who will be rich, who will be poor, who will be the one that to be troubled, who will be, wandering around, who will be at peace. And then it says, but Teshuva, Tefillah, and Tzedakah. Now, when I was going to Orthodox schools and temple, it used to say Teshuva, Tefillah, and Tzedakah can avert the decree, will change the decree, but that's really not what it's translated as. It means it can lighten or mitigate, soften the decree. So even if you're having a hard life, how would Teshuva, which is repair and repentance, but repair, tefillah, prayer, spirituality, and tzedakah, good deeds, how would that lighten any hardships that we have, would you say? How would it?
The essence of it may not be specific, but it represents quality, the quality of both, the quality of your life, the peace within your life. Even the quality of your death can be alleviated. That living the good life has a reward in the sense of it may not be just the quality in your active life, but it also reflects our belief of the afterlife and how you earn credit, so to speak, in God's afterlife, if you have that belief.
I like that answer. Last night we had our last film of the African American film series, and we watched Good Trouble, the story of John Lewis, who just passed away. And what was extraordinary, and we talked about John Lewis, is the kind of life he led. Now he started, he was 80, so he was born in 1940. He went through Jim Crow. He marched, he was a freedom rider. He marched with Martin Luther King. He was beaten and jailed and hospitalized constantly, but he kept moving forward with this vision. And you see how much he accomplished, how many bills he passed, how amazingly, it's like, how could he do this? So loving, so positive in his whole life. He lived this incredibly rich life to the very last day. And even after he died, he left a letter to the world about how he said, together we can save the soul of America was the topic of his letter. He left a legacy afterwards in that same spirit. So when Jeff talks about the quality of our life, it's also how we choose to live our lives, and we had a big discussion about how could he be so positive and nonviolent in the face of all of the challenges that he met in his life, and yet he did, and he was so inspirational by being so, like, what we say in the Musar movement, by changing myself, I can change the world. And it was his own behavior. So that's kind of like the important message of Rosh Hashanah. So now just some details. What's the holiday prayer book called? Like, it's not called Sidur. What's it called?
Machzor.
Machzor. I guess, which comes from the word lachazor, which means to return. But it's like to review. You're reviewing and you're re-looking at your life. But it's the only time we use the word machzor is for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It's a special prayer book. And when I was growing up, everybody had to own one. They didn't give you it. You had to buy your own and bring it to shul and have the machzor. And it has all these readings and all, it's very thick. And then the core of it is this Unatana Tokef, this prayer, which means we cede power. We are powerless. And on Rosh Hashanah, it's determined, again, who will live, who will die, who will, what our future will be and how to handle it. So that's like the prayer. I would say that we know in the Reform movement, the Unatana Tokef is the most important prayer. And the second one is probably Avinu Malkeinu. And what do you know about Avinu Malkeinu? Can anybody say anything about Avinu Malkeinu? And what does it even mean? Does anybody know what Avinu Malkeinu means?
I only know the song.
Okay, so Avinu means
Our King.
our Father, our Father, our King, which some people have a problem with seeing God as a king. Do any of you have a problem with the idea of God as king or sovereign? You don't. Anybody?
So I have in the past, but I had a woman explain to me, not from our faith-based group, and she said, look, if this is the kingdom, then we are all princes and princesses, and we should all act accordingly and treat each other with utmost respect. And I really like that. So it let me let go of my feminist, like, oh, it's a guy, it's a king, it's a man.
Also, when this was conceived, the idea of king being God was like in the Roman times, or even after that, that the literal king of a country was appointed by God, or in times of the Caesars, he was a god. The Caesar or the king was God. So to say Adonai is my king was radical, was a rebellion. To say Caesar is not my king, Adonai, God, Elohim is my king, and he's my father. And, the rabbis talk about what's the difference between a father and a king? Let's just talk about that for a minute, because that is supposed to reflect some of the attributes of God. What is the difference between a father and a king, would you say?
Well, father would be the loving kindness aspect of it and the protection. And the king is a ruler, a commander. We were hoping that the king would want to protect his subjects, but that's not always the case. So you've got two aspects of it. The more compassionate and forgiving, and the more judgmental and ruling.
That is very true, and that's what they say. But also, it's interesting, if you look at the rules for a king in the Torah of a regular
Right.
king, you belong to the people. You can't have too many horses, you can't have too many wives, you can't have too many material possessions, and you serve the people. You belong to the people. So our view of king is not like the King of England or the Roman Caesars, but more like a protector of the people, and the compassionate and the protector. Now, the term Avinu Malkeinu and the first prayer of it was written in like 150 BCE, no, CE, during right after the destruction of the temple, because Rabbi Akiba is the one who came up with this phrase. And what happened was, it was a terrible drought in the ancient land of Israel. And the people were praying and asking God for rain. And there wasn't any rain. And then they called Rabban Gamliel, who was like the great head of the Sanhedrin. And he was considered a mystic. And he knew magical words and he knew incantations, because people believed in all that stuff. And he tried, and there was no rain. And then Rabbi Akiba, who was a young, a disciple, a student of him, just ran up and said, Avinu Malkeinu. It's something like, we're in your hands, have compassion on us, have pity on us. It was this outburst, and it started to rain. So this is a midrash, but it's, well, who knows? You never know. But it started raining. So then the rabbis started asking, why did God answer the prayer of Rabbi Akiba and not Rabban Gamliel? And what they said is that Rabban Gamliel was a very haughty, proud man. And he never asked forgiveness or admitted he made a mistake. Whereas Rabbi Akiba was a very humble man who did ask for forgiveness and did acknowledge his flaws and his failings. And that's why God answered his prayers and sort of teaches us the modeling of the kind of Jew that God appreciates, is a person whose prayers he will listen to, is the one who says, it's the Teshuva idea. I made a mistake, I was wrong, and I'm trying to repair it. So that's where the expression Avinu Malkeinu came from. And it's 2,000 years old, this prayer, or the beginning of this prayer. So that's a real, when the things we ask for in Avinu Malkeinu are the most human. I mean, it's like, bless our children, defend us from our enemies, protect us from pestilence and illness, have compassion on it. It's the stuff we really, really want. It tells us what's really important, the Avinu Malkeinu. That's what we care about. The rest of it, not so much. So it's a very essential prayer of the High Holy Days.
You asked a question about a parent versus the king.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you can say about that difference is the first is based on what we would hope is unconditional love.
Right.
Versus the love a king shows is earned by the behavior of his subjects, more or less. So that it's the difference between a true parent and a man who is more or less placed in a position of guardianship and who rewards on the basis of what you've earned, rather than the fact that this love is unconditional.
You're right. And the last prayer of Avinu Malkeinu is, bless us and save us, even though we don't deserve it.
Exactly.
And that's the opposite, isn't it? Saying that if God is more like a king, the reference, then that would be that the king is of service no matter what, trying to do the best for the people, even when the people fail. That's more unconditional love, because I thought the whole thing is that God is supposed to be that, no?
But there's, the king is more about justice, punishment, discipline, the law, the rule. I think, we go by the rule, we go by the protocol, whatever, whereas the father's like, I love you anyway. That's why they put the two together, because we are aware of that dichotomy or that combination.
The Teshuva is the mechanism by which God does his forgiveness. and does show his love. Without Teshuva, without repentance, without this holiday, children are running wild. There is no earned love.
That's right. You have to make amends. You have to change your ways. You have to change your ways.
But what about the whole thing with, I thought that we had this whole study where we talked about how through prayer, it's not about asking for things, it's about elevating ourselves to be closer to God rather than asking God for favors like rain or
Thankfulness.
Okay.
Being thankful is the expression of prayer. It's not asking for anything, it's recognizing what you have and thanking.
So the Avinu Malkeinu.
No, there are many aspects to prayer. There's the thankfulness of prayer. There's the praise of God for, there's gratitude, there's praise, and then there's ask. There is ask. The Amidah is the ask. But psychologically, the rabbis have it so first we praise God, and then we go, oh, you're the best. Then we say, thank you for
Thanks, Dad. Give me a new Mercedes.
Give me another one.
I want a new Mercedes.
Right, no. But usually in our if you also notice, Talia, our prayers are in the plural. It's not give me, it's give us. And so we're all praying for each other, the well-being for each other and the safety and the health of each other. So it's also the nature of the kind of prayer that we're offering that's important. But yes, it elevates your soul, but so do good deeds really elevate your soul. That's the way you elevate your soul. It's not just your prayers, but it's your behavior and the tzedakah you do, the tefillah and the tzedakah. So
I was just going to go back to one question that I didn't get to answer when you were talking about the shofar.
I'm about to do the shofar. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, the entire value is to each of us is that you absolutely must hear the shofar during this period of time.
Right.
Without that, it almost nullifies your involvement in the entire acts of the holidays.
It's the most, you must hear the shofar. Yes. So
why? The idea, where does that stem from?
Okay, so it stems from calling this day Yom Teruah, the day of the shofar blast. So now in the Torah, which is kind of a shorthand sometimes, there's no explanation, but there are many explanations by the rabbis and the commentaries that I'm going to talk about in a second. But just for a little trivia question, how many blasts of the shofar are there on Rosh HaShana? There's one on Yom Kippur, the last one, Tekiah Gedola. But how many blasts on Rosh Hashanah? Karen, 3?
Yeah.
So you mean the 3 different notes?
Yes.
Yeah. But how many actual times does somebody blow one of those notes?
Was it 48 or something like that?
All right, 48. Anybody else? Take a guess. You're too quiet today. Robert, take a guess.
The guess is around 100.
100.
Oh, no, I don't think so.
Miriam said 100. Who and Roy said 100, right?
Right, up to 100.
And Robert?
200.
Enough to get the job done.
100. 100 blasts. So thrilling to hear them. 100 blasts.
Is it 100?
Yes, 100. So fantastic. So why and what do they say? So first of all, there are the 3 kinds of blasts. The first one is called the Tekiah, and it's the one long blast. And that is considered, they say it's a summons. Come, Jews, come forward. It's also what they used when they were announcing war or an enemy coming. They would stand on the mountaintop and they would do the woo, meaning it's a warning and a summons. And another understanding is that it's the coronation or the entrance of the king. It's like the kingship, so there's that one. That's the Tekiah. And then the second one is the Shavarim, which is do, do, do. 3 blasts, and Shavarim means shattered, means broken. Lishbor is to smash something. And so what are these? And they say that these 3 blasts sound like moaning and pain, crying, or sorrow, kind of a wail of sorrow. And I think also to remind us of our own brokenness. We're broken. There's a piece of us that's broken. That's why we're asking for forgiveness. We're wanting to heal. First, we're recognizing this. So that is the second one, to recognize our brokenness, our humanity, our frailty, our vulnerability. So we're called to come forward and stand up to recognize our frailty, our vulnerability. And then the third one is called Teruah, and it's, somebody has something on that you need to stop.
I think Jeff forgot to mute.
Jeff. Jeff.
He stepped away. You can mute him.
I know. Okay. And the next one is 9. Yeah, Hannah, you can mute Jeff.
If you can make me co-host, I lost internet, so that's why I popped off.
I don't have. I'm not the host.
Yeah, you are.
I am.
Yeah.
Where do I go to for that?
So scroll over my name in the participants.
Yeah. Okay.
And it says more.
Oh yeah.
And then you can make me the co-host, and then I can help manage people's sound.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you. Okay. But don't mute all.
No.
Okay. All right. So the third one is Teruah, and it's 9 little breaths. I think that was 9. It's 9. And that is supposed to sound like an alarm clock. Wake up. And Maimonides says it means wake up and look at your life, pay attention, make changes. So the shofar blasts themselves start to tell us their importance by the sounds of them. So, and then there are 3 parts to the shofar service that also want us to contemplate different parts of our lives. And they all have the different shofar blasts in them. The first one's called Malchiyot, which means the kingship of God. And really we can see it as not everything is under our control. We don't have total control. There's something higher than us in the world. And it can, if you're a very firm believer in God, you can say it's God that's higher than us. But you can also say, beyond me, there's my family. There's my community, there's my country. They're bigger than me, and not everything is about me. There's something bigger that I need to pay attention to and work to help. So that's Malchuyot, which literally comes from the word Melech and Malkenu, kingdom. The second one is Zichronot, which is just like Yom HaZikaron. It means remembrances by God. And traditionally, this section, we're saying, God, remember us. And I'm going to ask you a question, and I want everyone to answer this question. For the sake of our ancestors, because they were so good, for their merit, they have merit, and on their merit, remember us and forgive us and bless us. So in my second day Rosh HaShana teaching on Malchuyot, as Zichronot, if you watch it, I hope you will, on the second day, I say, I really think that there have to be more Jews than 4,000 years ago that were good enough for us to be remembered by. There have to be other Jews in history for whom their merit was so great that we could be remembered by. And I named 4, which I'm not going to tell you. But I would like to ask you, is there a Jew in history after Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the Bible, that you think their merit was good enough that God could remember us for their sake? Is there a Jew ever in history that and you could be living today or in history, who you think has that goodness, has that merit?
Bob Dylan.
Bob Dylan. Why?
Because he's a poet and he speaks for the people and he speaks for the meek, and because he's he's not, what's the word? That's a sin, to be like showy and like think you're better than.
Right. Okay. He's not arrogant. He's not.
Not arrogant. That's the word. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Another Jew. I really want to hear from everyone. A Jew in history. Yes, Miriam.
Not that he epitomizes everything ideal, but Elie Wiesel must go down in history as one of the greatest spokesmen for Judaism, because
I agree with that.
He's one of my four.
Okay. Oh, is he?
Oh,
great. And for many, many reasons, not many people know that he was so involved in other countries because he felt that Judaism took care of all people, not just Jews.
That's right.
So the idea of suffering in other countries made him literally pick up and go to those countries and meet with their leaders.
Right. He was called by the LA Times as the most important Jew in America, and by the Nobel Peace Prize Committee as like a beacon to humanity. So I would agree.
The way he spoke, and it's the way he spoke for Jews without anger that was so admirable.
I agree. Okay, Elie Wiesel, Bob Dylan. Yeah, Bob, Robert.
I'm going to go with Buddy Rich. Big surprise. Musical genius who brought love and joy to the world and toured all over the world. He was a great father. He
played the drums?
Yes, he was a great father. He was a great husband. And he was someone who was constantly doing good deeds for the poor and the less fortunate without making a big deal about it. And he was a devout Jew, even though he was constantly touring on the road.
Thank you. That was like part of his adult b'nai mitzvah speech.
I took his Hebrew name.
Yeah, I took his Hebrew name. Yes, Roy.
I would probably say, unlike someone who's noted and famous as the Jews unknown or unnamed that lived according to, the values that, maybe they're in the Warsaw Ghetto, maybe they're in Auschwitz, that, made others' lives better or followed the faith, that said the Shema at their death or whatever. I mean, to me, those are the heroes too.
Yes, Holocaust victims. Mordechai Anulevich, who led the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, was a 23-year-old kid, and he led a huge uprising and just said, we're going to die with honor. We're going to live with honor, and we're going to die with honor. So those people are definitely, their merit is definitely something we would want God to remember. Okay, anyone else? I want to hear from people.
I'll probably get laughed at, but I think of Sandy Koufax.
Well, yeah, he stood for something.
He made a big, great statement.
That's right. When he refused to play in the World Series on Yom Kippur, he made a big statement for Jews at a time when Jews were kind of trying to keep their heads down and not not pull attention to themselves. So I agree with you. I understand that. Absolutely. Okay. Who else? Somebody else.
I'll give you one. I'll give you a name.
Okay.
And you can expand on it if you like, but one of the greatest tragedies in our history was the Holocaust, and the Holocaust destroyed and created so much depression and death. The one man who helped give us a psychology to alleviate that was Viktor Frankel.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Viktor Frankel said, you have to look to the future. You have to look to what you have yet to do and yet to accomplish in your life. That you cannot look backward or be stuck in the past, that you have too much potential and too much work to do. This changed the lives of many Holocaust survivors and allowed them to become productive people again.
This amazing book, Man's Search for Meaning, if you haven't read it, it's an amazing book. And he says, if you have meaning in your life, you can endure a lot or survive a lot, that you must find meaning and purpose in your life, which we know is a very important part of Judaism, to have meaning and purpose. Just a minute. Hannah, do you
I
want
just want to say about Viktor
1 second.
Frankl.
Wait 1 second. Hannah, do you want to add somebody? But you're muted.
Unmute.
Okay.
Yes, I know. I was, I have a lot of noise in the background with some handymen here. So I'm listening, but two people, Eli Weitzel, I'm probably butchering his last name, and I remember reading that book, was very impactful. But no, I can't add to this conversation. So
Well, Ellie Wiesel, that's fine. We are allowed to have two. Just 1 second, Miriam. Lori, yeah.
Well, the antithesis of looking forward is looking backward, but I was thinking about Chaim Weizmann.
Chaim Weizmann, who was one of the founders and the first president of the state of Israel and the Weizmann Institute. He was a scientist as well, I believe. So Chaim Weizmann, yes. Okay, Miriam, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to add to Viktor Frankl, who I was also thinking about at that moment. When asked personally, what is the reason? Can you give us any reasons why some lived and some died? He says, no, there is no reason. But what helped me was if I had a piece of bread, I actually wanted to share it with my fellow man.
That is so beautiful. That is beautiful. And that gave him that feeling. Just a minute. Karen, do you have somebody?
No.
No Jew that you think are merit. What about in the arts? You know so many great Jewish artists.
Well, Mandy Patinkin.
Okay, why?
Oh, well, he's got such soul. He's such a Jewish singer. He connects, he really connects with God when he sings.
Yes, and he also brings his Judaism into the world very proudly.
Yes.
You know what I mean? He's very proud about it, and he doesn't try to hide it. He didn't change his name.
Right.
We both know him personally, so you're absolutely right. That's a good choice. Ruth.
What about the women? We haven't mentioned any women.
So
there was the lady who brought the children out of Europe into Israel during the war. She parachuted into Germany several times and brought, it wasn't Hannah
Senish?
I think so.
Hannah Senish, yes. And then she was caught and killed, but well, yes, there are many women. Another woman where you're going to find my whole sermon, but anyway, Lillian Wald was a woman who lived in the early part of the 20th century in New York. And she was a nurse. She was going to go to medical school, but she saw the appalling conditions of the immigrants and their children.
Yes.
And she founded and started the Henry Street Settlement House.
Yes, perfect.
Amazing.
I agree.
Educated.
She helped found the Jewish centers too. Yes.
Jewish centers. And she started the first visiting nurses society, where nurses went out to different homes. Like if you ever watched that British show called The Midwife, go to your house. She started that, the first one. And also, I didn't know this, but she was very much about civil rights for Blacks, and she was on the founding committee of the NAACP, a Jewish woman. And she probably was a lesbian, because she never married and she did live with different women. So she, represented all different kinds of demographics and fought for their rights, but her focus was on women and children, and not just Jews, but all, immigrant women and children, and educating, helping them be educated, teaching women how to speak English, how to, have hygiene, how to have health and nutrition and all that kind of stuff. So, and what about Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
Yeah, thought of her too. Yeah.
And a heroine of mine is Gloria Steinem, personally, who I feel changed my life as a woman, gave me permission to be something beyond a wife or a mother or a teacher, which is really all I was offered when I was being raised as my options in life. So she expanded, and then Sally Priesand, who's the first woman rabbi. That took a lot of guts. So there are a lot of women. Did anyone not get to Robert? Yes.
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Albert Einstein.
Oh.
And what I find particularly compelling about him is in the beginning of the 20th century, there was religion was under a huge attack from Freud and Darwin and Marx. And here's a man who was undisputably one of the great scientific geniuses of all time. And as I understand it, believes in God. And so if you wanted to talk about a buttress against the collapse of religion under modern, new modern thought, I mean, he's your guy.
Thank you. Yes.
And you were talking about women, and his hair did look like he was wearing a woman's wig. So he's sort of tangentially related. Yeah.
A whole nother group that you haven't mentioned at all that benefits us all by exposing Jewish humor and self-deprecation and how to deal with disarming anti-Semitism to the audience, to the world. The multiple examples of all the humorists that spent their lives standing on stage and taking the ridicule of being Jewish with Jewish humor to make the point that anti-Semitism needs to be drowned out by exposure.
That's absolutely true. So we can see, my point being that when we do Zichronot, that part of the shofar service, and we're said, God, remember us for the sakes of, you don't have to limit it to our ancient ancestors. There are many Jews, and perhaps it might inspire us to want to have enough merit that people will say, remember me for the sake of us. If we can, look at them as role models and examples of how to live meaningful lives, as Viktor Frankel would say. And the third part of the shofar blast is called shofrot, which just means blasts. And it's this idea, again, of waking yourself up, being, completely shaken out of your complacency. Don't be complacent. Don't sit on your laurels. Though I have to say, I think it's important to remember the good things you did in the past year. I know we have all done bad things, but we make a promise each year to change. And if we have made those changes, it's valuable to look at that and feel good about it and be proud of it, and to congratulate or praise others who you see have made the changes, because as we know, it's really hard to make change. And I think our temple has done an amazing job on a dime. Basically in a day, we said we're closing. Now what are we going to do? And the changes that the temple has made, the first one being,
yes,
I had a call. It was too much because we changed it. But all right, Susan Nanus and Bo Shapiro, you're going to call every single person 80 and over and see how they're doing. And that was 300 people. So I called 150 people. And it was hard, but it was also very inspiring, because most of those people were like incredibly philosophical and positive and encouraging. And another thing that I found, which is really beautiful, is I'd say 90% of them, their adult children and grandchildren were right there, taking care of them, bringing them food, visiting them all these months. So we have a very beautiful congregation, and I heard it first from them and then from their kids and grandkids. So you might want to just let Rabbi Leader know, or Donna Nadel know, if you wanted to thank them for the amazing changes, because we do some of it, but they really conceived the whole thing. But Shofrot, I think, should be about becoming aware of what we need to do and what we have done. I think it's very important. Okay, so now we go to the customs at home. Now we all know we have a round challah. We know that, right? You have a round challah on Rosh HaShana, the rest, and Yom Kippur. The rest of the year, it's long, it's round. Why? Why do we have a round challah on Rosh Hashanah and then we break the fast? Yes, Lori.
To have a full year.
Yes, that's what I always heard. But then I found another reason.
Continuity.
What? What did you say?
The continuity, that we never come to the end of anything. We just keep going on.
That's right.
It's cyclical.
No breaks. That's always what I knew. But also, it's also the shape of a crown. Think about it. It's the shape of a crown, and it's like the crown also of God or the king or whatever. So it's a double meaning, and a lot of them are stuffed with. We have raisins. We want a sweet year, as we know. We dip it in honey, and Got Kosher makes a challah that literally has apple in it. Amazing apple filling, like an apple pie. If you want to have amazing challah on Rosh HaShanah, you should. It's amazing. So we
the Glot Market, from where?
No, Got Kosher. It's like it's right there on.
It's on Pico and Robertson.
Yeah,
it's on Pico, and it's immediately east of Robertson.
It's across the street from the Wells Fargo, literally.
Yeah,
on Pico. So it's
Miriam. What don't you know, Miriam? You've got it all.
He does.
But don't I know? Give me a few hours or days, and I'll tell you.
I can imagine.
And we take an apple and we dip it in honey. The apple's also round, and honey, is also it's considered like a natural antibiotic, a healing thing. So the apple has multiple symbols, and also it's made by bees, and so we don't want the sting. We take the sweet. There's a sting and the sweet, so we are reminded of both, but we opt for the sweet. And then in some communities, we eat pomegranates also on Rosh HaShanah, and they say, may our merits or our good deeds be as many as the pomegranate. One second. There's a theory that there are 613 seeds in the pomegranate. I don't know if anybody ever counted. And so it symbolizes all the mitzvot. Yes, Lori.
I always thought it was be fruitful and multiply.
That's also true, because there's a lot of little fruit in there. So
beware the pomegranate if you're on multiple antihypertensive medicines, because the pomegranate is got some antagonistic effects for those medications.
Oh, I didn't know that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's star fruit, and there are others that I can name.
Didn't they say that in the Garden of Eden that it wasn't an apple and that it was pomegranate?
It says it's a fruit. They don't really say. Just say it's a fruit.
I thought that. Oh, okay.
There's no word. But it's interesting. The word for pomegranate is rimon, and it's also the word in Israel for a hand grenade.
Oh, wow.
Same
And
shape.
also for bells.
God.
Also for bells. Rimonim are bells also.
Right, that's right. But it's also a hand grenade. Also, I found this is an interesting detail. You don't eat nuts on Rosh Hashanah, because according to the Gematria, which is numerology, like Chai is numerology. Like the letter Chet is 8, and the letter Yud of Chai is 10, and so we say 18 is Chai. So we give gifts in, this, in 18, 36, 54. We give it in multiples of 18. Thank you. So the word for nut is egoz, and apparently my neighbor, I don't know what they're doing, egoz, and the same numerology spells chet, which means sin. So they both have the equal number of numbers, which is, it spells sin. So we don't eat nuts, and we don't eat horseradish with gefilte fish because we don't want a bitter year. So you don't do that. So those are all the things that we do, traditionally at home. And how much time do we have? Yeah. Okay. So the Torah reading, and I want your opinion on why you think this is. We don't do this at Wilshire Boulevard Temple, unfortunately, because most people don't go for 2 days to celebrate Rosh HaShanah. But traditionally, the first day we read the birth of Isaac, and the second day we read the sacrifice of Isaac, the binding of Isaac. At Wilshire Boulevard Temple, the first day we read the binding of Isaac because everybody comes that day, and the second day we read the story of creation, which is equally beautiful because of the idea of the world being created. But why do you think the rabbis would pick the birth of Isaac on the first day and the sacrifice of Isaac on the second day as the Torah readings for that? Hannah.
No, my son was calling me and I told him 5 more minutes.
Oh. Do you have an opinion on that, though?
Sorry, he was talking at the same time too. So no, I didn't hear it.
First day, we read the story of Sarah being told that she's going to give birth to a boy, little child, and she does. And when she hears it, I think you know this, but I'll just review it. She laughs, and the name Isaac means laughter. Because she laughed. She said, how could a 90-year-old woman give birth? But of course, you know, in the Torah and the stories, she does, and God rebuilds her womb, and she's young, and she nurses him with her own milk. And in the Midrash, I love this, all the women, wherever these women were, the nearby women, the Canaanite women said, there's no way, that's not her baby, she's too old, it's probably Hagar's baby, you know, the second younger Egyptian slave's baby, and she's pretending. And so then Sarah nursed her son, and then she nursed all the babies in the town, and whoever had partook of her milk became a king or a warrior or a wise man. So they're saying she had miraculous breast milk, magical breast milk. But this story of her being told that she'll have a child, a desired child, is the first day. And the second day is the story of God telling Abraham to go and sacrifice this child. So why do you think the rabbis picked that? Thinking about Rosh Hashanah and all the themes we've talked about, do you have any opinions about that? No opinions.
It bespeaks the ability to address God and have an answer. Both are dependent on what God chooses to do in his own timing, to either create the answer or in the Akedah to manipulate all the action to arrive at Abraham's sense of responsibility to God. But it seems like it again addresses the need for communication with God, the prayer element of being answered or not being answered, the why question.
That's interesting. That's very elevated and spiritual. I think, you know, you're born and you have no idea what life's going to bring. It brings hardships, it brings tragedy, it brings trauma, that you can live, you can die, you can have loss. I mean, it's sort of the reality of life. I mean, it's now Isaac did not die, but the promise, the test, the hardship of that story really talks about the two sides of life, the joy and the tragedy, you know, or the gifts and the losses. I always say, some people say that the shofar blowing of all the sounds, this is another midrash, that when Sarah, Isaac's mother and Abraham's wife, heard that her husband had taken their son to be sacrificed, that's the screams of Sarah. You know, oh, no. And then it says she died. When she found out, she dropped dead. So, I mean, in the Midrash, because we never hear from her again, and then the next time we hear from her, she's dead and Abraham is burying her. So the rabbis say when she heard that, she thought he had been killed, and those are her screams. So that's another interpretation of the Torah thing. So I think it's kind of making us face life. It's not, you know, it's hard and painful sometimes. That's maybe what's coming up for us. We don't know. So that is, I think, why we read the bookends, the happy part and the sad part, or the creation story. And the last thing I want to say is, you know, what day of the creation are we celebrating on Rosh Hashanah? Because there were 6 days, and then Shabbat. So which day do you think we're talking about? Any ideas?
The sixth day.
Sunday.
The day man was created.
Yes. Man and woman, human. Yes.
Human.
The sixth day. The sixth day is the day that because that's when humanity was created. So that's the day that we say the world was born for us. You know, I don't know if you watched my, you probably did, but yesterday we're doing these little Elul videos, and I did some midrashim yesterday about it. And the one thing that I found was interesting is that it turns out every human being on this planet comes from one woman in Africa. She's called the mitochondrial Eve, she's called. And it turns out that there was this one African woman, and we all have some of her, every human being on the planet has some of her DNA. So even though in the Torah, it's like the first human or the first man or the first human for us that we're all descended from is a woman, a black woman, which I think is so interesting, considering all this racism where our source is a black mother. So I just think that's a little bit of information. So I'm not going to go over this with you, but if you download the thing, I gave you some philosophical questions to think about now or during the 10 days. And there's some things to contemplate about how we're going to approach the year ahead. And there was, I love this one. What was the most important decision I need to make this year? And what was the most important decision I avoided last year? We could talk all about this. But so another thing I want you to know is next week we're not going to have class. I'm taking a week off. I haven't had a break since January. And I'm just taking 5-6 days off. So there will be no class next week. We'll all take a break and then reconvene in 2 weeks. And
Wednesday and Friday, or just
Wednesday? Well, I don't, there's always something Friday. It won't be me, but there'll be Torah on Friday. But next Wednesday, there won't be a class. But I'll be back in 2 weeks. I'm not even going anywhere. I'm just taking a rest. I need a brain rest from all the stuff we've been doing. So I want to, recharge. I really need a recharge. So I want to wish you all Shabbat Shalom in advance, and remind you that on September 12th is Slichot. It's going to be so beautiful online here at 8:30 p.m. It's with 3 other temples, a lot of music, really gorgeous. So I hope but I think we'll see each other. Yeah, right before then. Right before then we'll see each other. So I'll remind you. So I'm going to say goodbye for now, and I'll see you soon, and sending you love.
Thank you, Susan.
Likewise, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy your time off and
Absolutely.
Enjoy your well-deserved rest.
Thank you. I will.
A good bottle of wine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.